we're now in January 2026, and we've got to worry about FEOC, or Foreign Entity of Concern compliance. So the rules are stricter, especially for batteries. We've got our percentages. We talked about them on previous episodes, but essentially a percentage of the project needs to be not from foreign entities of concern that are named, particularly China. And it's imperative for CapEx projects to ensure that the equipment is FEOC compliant and that there's meticulous documentation that's done with your developer and these records maintained over the next 5 to 7 years, so that you don't have to worry about any sort of IRS clawback of these tax credits.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Renewable Rides. It's mine and Dan's first recording together in 2026, and I'm excited for another year. Dan, how are you? How was the Christmas break?
It was excellent, Gareth. As I shared with you, I think December, this past December, was my favorite December I had, both personally, professionally. We had a great close to the year at VECKTA. I got to go do some of the things that I love to do. Went and saw a live music show up in San Francisco. Got to golf with some friends. Had a full house at Christmas. Having young kids, the Christmas time is very magical. So all in, it was pretty incredible, and feeling really energized coming into the new year. How about yourself?
That's great. Yeah, normally we travel for Christmas to family and friends in far-flung places, but this year we stayed local, and Ethan and I took advantage of our ski passes and got probably 11 days worth of skiing in over the break, and so super excited about that. The snow was pretty mixed, but it was nice to hang out with him, spend time, be in the mountains, and then hang out with Mel as the team of three, and just keep it simple and local. So it was really good.
Love it. I mean, that you're doing exactly why you made the move up there. So it's nice to see you fulfilling that.
Yeah, exactly. 2025, Dan, quickly, how would you summarize it in a few words?
I think for me, when I reflect back on it, it's really a tale of two halves. The first half being incredibly challenging, uncertain. There was a lot of questions that we had for ourselves, that our customers had for themselves. Nobody was really making decisions, and then really as we started to get some clarity, we got through a lot of the chaos of tariffs, and that never ends. I just saw some more tariffs announced this morning, but clarity on that, clarity on the tax credits. The second half of the year was incredible, and companies really feel like they want to move and want to take advantage of what's on the table, which is exactly why we're going to be talking about the tax credits today. But how about for you? Any major reflections?
Yeah, I think the big one for me was it was the year of energy becoming mainstream media, and I think this is the first year for decades to come. I think finally we've tipped over the edge of people realizing that we're reliant on a pretty fragile infrastructure, and there's lots of exciting opportunities to take more control of that. So I think it was a year of real foundational base building momentum that is going to carry strong into 2026. So super exciting. I think data centers and AI we have a lot to thank them for in terms of making energy front page news. So, but certainly for anyone who's interested in 2025 reflections and 2026 in more detail, check out episode 103 with Bill Newsey. Dan and I chat through all of that in a lot more detail. So head that way.
Yeah. It was pretty, to your point, like pretty wild to see election or energy taking center stage on a variety of elections around the country, which I think it's just emphasizing more and more, and seeing folks like the governor of Illinois signing new legislation just in the past week related to energy. More to come as we continue on, but it's been really encouraging.
Yeah, even chatting to one of our board members the other day, Dan, John was saying that energy was part of a lot more of the election discussion in the last round in Australia, and I think Bill's prediction was for the midterms and the election to come, energy is going to be center stage. So very interesting times.
Yeah.
Any big 2026 goals, Dan?
For me, really, I continue to focus on being present, both in anything I'm doing, trying to be as present as possible, focusing on my personal health and taking advantage of more steams and exercising more. So those are some of my big ones. And I know you've got a pretty big audacious goal. What are you getting after?
Yeah, well, we both started the year with our fast, which is great. For those that don't know, Dan and I try and do a quarterly fast, but we kicked off the year with that. This one was a particularly hard one. I don't know whether it was a heavy detox post the Christmas indulgence, but yeah, on the fitness front, with a buddy back home, we're doing the 2026 challenge, so 2026 miles in the year. I'm going to make kilometers my goal, but miles my stretch goal. But that equates to a little over 5 kilometers or 5 miles a day. So it's all about consistency, because if you miss one or two, it's very hard to catch up. So that's keeping me pretty dialed in right now.
Or you could just do a couple, 100-mile runs. You've done that before, and just like buy yourself some time.
I might have to, the back end of the year, might end up taking that shape if I miss any. But yeah, super excited for that. And then the other big one is the book Power and Profits is going to come out this spring. So that's a big personal goal, to make sure that we continue to educate the industry and empower people to take action.
Absolutely. No, it's I've gotten a bit of a sneak peek, and I love where you're going with it. So excited for sharing that with our listeners and beyond.
Nice. All right, Dan. Well, let's dig in. It's ITC time. We've talked about this several times over the last year or so, but now more than ever, it's particularly important. And it sounds technical, but actually, it's one of the biggest financial opportunities that companies face in the coming months and years. So do you want to dig in on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the topics where, when done right, like, companies can materially change the economics of a project. And if you do it wrong or move too slowly and miss some of the deadlines, you can lose millions of dollars across, individual sites or across portfolios.
Exactly. So we're talking about the investment tax credit here, which some people refer to as the ITC. And it phases out under the latest legislation from a solar perspective. And so the key message up front that we want everyone to take away from this is this isn't potentially going to happen. It's happening, and it's not something you should wait on. There's free money on the table, and we need to ensure that we capture that.
So before we get too deep into things, Gareth, let's ground ourselves. Like, why does the ITC matter so much right now, or I guess in general?
Yeah, well, this is like real money at stake. These aren't abstract incentives. The ITC as a base can offset 30% of a project's costs right out of the gate. And then when you layer in things like energy community bonuses or domestic content, you can actually get as much as 50% of the total cost of your capital investment. And this can reduce your tax bill dollar for dollar. And even if you can't use the tax credits yourself, you can carry them forward, you can sell them, or a developer can capture them on your behalf and pass on the savings to you.
Yeah. So this applies both if you're writing a check and doing a CapEx project and holding this on your balance sheet, or you're doing a power purchase agreement, or frankly, in some of the cases of our customers that are commercial real estate asset owners, even if you're just looking to lease the roof of your structure and have a developer build a system, it can materially impact the lease rates that you can garner from that developer. So it has a follow-on effect on every single commercial model out there.
Yeah, exactly. So even energy as a service or PPA contract style deals, the tax credit should definitely still be baked into the economics of your project, and you should benefit from that pricing.
Yeah, so this isn't just about policy optimism or criticism. It's really just time for disciplined execution on these projects.
Yeah, and so the reason for today's episode is some looming deadlines, Dan. This is where people often get tripped up. So can you kind of bring us up to speed on what people should be very aware of?
Yeah, so for the deadlines, really, there's a couple which can bring some confusion. And I've even had, we closed out the year with a deadline. It wasn't that the tax credits were going away. It just means that we have some new foreign entity of concern compliance regulations. But I've even heard people be like, oh, I missed the December 31st deadline, and so now we won't be able to capture the tax credits. That's not the case. They are still available. They're still very much for the taking. So for projects below 1.5 megawatts AC, or alternating current, which means the nameplate is typically bigger in DC, you've got two options. You can either safe harbor your project by July 3rd. We'll get into what safe harboring means in a minute. By July 3rd of this year, 2026. Or if you miss that deadline, then you have to have the project placed into service by December 31st, 2027. And for projects above 1.5 megawatts AC, you either begin physical work by July 3rd of this year, which frankly, your project largely needs to be in motion right now for physical work to really happen. Or again, if you miss that date, then you have to have the project placed into service by the end of 27, which again is there's still a lot of time.
Yeah. And there's a real nuance here that a lot of people miss, Dan, is if you safe harbor or begin physical work by July 3rd, you unlock another 4 years of additional time to complete your project, correct?
Correct, and it's a real lever. In fact, I was just on the phone with a company yesterday, really a high end fashion brand that has warehouses and other facilities here, and they're putting together kind of the future of their campus. So they're adding some buildings, and they're going to have final designs ready in the next few months, but they're not going to be breaking ground on that project till either late this year or sometime in 2027. And so for them, their strategy is safe harbor the project and then buy themselves a couple of years to even start on the solar end of the project because they have that 4-year window to place the project into service.
Yeah, super cool. So let's unpack this safe harbor term a little bit more because I think there's a lot of information around this.
Yeah, well, it certainly doesn't mean we signed a contract and we feel really good about it, and now we're good in the eyes of the IRS.
Yeah, exactly. To actually safe harbor, there's 3 things that must happen by July 3rd. You need to have a binding contract with your supplier. You need to have committed at least 5% of the total project costs. And frankly, we actually recommend more to be safe in the event that project specifications or economics change. And the supplier must actually purchase and allocate equipment to your project.
Yeah, the third one's huge because money actually has to change hands. It's not just a commitment to buy equipment or a net 30 terms on a contract. Money actually has to transfer so that the supplier can buy that equipment. And it's got to be assigned. And essentially, it gets tagged. It gets your name placed on it in the warehouse. And nobody's touching that until it's time to deploy the materials to your project site.
Yeah, and that's why we don't want to rush this process. It's already going to be rushed over the next few months, but you don't want to leave it until very last minute and then be forced into not running a competitive process and then exposing yourself to margin creep, supply chain risks, and documentation gaps that actually end up turning this on its head and you not being able to capture the tax credits as you intended.
Yeah. Now for larger projects, the ones that are above 1.5 megawatts AC, their requirement is the beginning of what's known as physical work. And this is where the IRS definitions really do matter.
Yeah. So physical work of a significant nature means actual construction activity. So this is like installing racking or foundations. In instances of the very large projects that you talk about, Dan, or projects that require custom equipment, the manufacturing of things like racking or specific equipment can count towards physical work. However, if the products are straight off the shelf and they're already warehoused, these materials do not count as physical work.
Yeah. And what it does not include, physical work, is the planning, permitting, financing, feasibility studies, or even site prep. For example, like if you're doing a ground mount system, it calls out that like grading of the site, it doesn't count as physical work because it's not the actual componentry of the project itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some people think, I'm doing structural tests on my roof or I'm doing some engineering design. That'll count, but it doesn't. If crews aren't actually installing physical structures tied to the solar system, you haven't started work.
Yeah. So let's talk timelines, Gareth, because this is really where people underestimate the risk. They underestimate internal, questioning and conflicts. So what are the timelines look like?
Yeah, having done a lot of these projects, we've kind of back calculated this to ensure that everyone's well positioned. So if you want a safe harbor, you're realistically looking at 9 to 16 weeks if everything goes super smoothly.
Yeah, and that assumes you already know what you want to build.
Yeah, exactly. The timeline includes your system design. You need to make sure that you're designing and building the right system, your RFP development to ensure you go to market and run a competitive process, your supplier bidding, evaluation, negotiation, contracting, supplier onboarding, payment needing to be made, and the equipment being procured. So that's not a small feat.
No, and all that means if you want to be safe, really you need to be starting this process at the very latest by April 1st, 2026. I put in here like if there is a possibility if you were to start say by May 1st of getting this done, but that's really just for companies that have a lot of experience purchasing these systems. Their legal teams are well aware of the terms. You have quick turns on contracts, and even then it'll be cutting it close.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the earlier the better, because we know from experience that internal approvals, legal reviews, payment processing, these things can really slow down decision making and stall projects.
Yeah, and there might be some of our listeners out there that just think, you know what, I'm not sure if we can meet this deadline over the next little less than 6 months to safe harbor a project. Let's worry about the place into service by the end of 27.
Yeah, and that's actually probably the riskiest strategy out of all of them.
Yeah, because there's a lot of variables that are become out of your control. There's interconnection, there's local permitting, and these can all take in some cases 4 months, in some cases upwards of 12 months.
Yeah, and then you'll miss the deadline entirely. And once it's gone, and that free money has evaporated. Now you got to take care of it yourself.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what we're seeing go wrong in the market, Dan, just so people can be aware of the minefields that they've got to avoid.
Yeah. First, we're now in January 2026, and we've got to worry about FEOC, or Foreign Entity of Concern compliance. So the rules are stricter, especially for batteries. We've got our percentages. We talked about them on previous episodes, but essentially a percentage of the project needs to be not from foreign entities of concern that are named, particularly China.
Yeah.
And it's imperative for CapEx projects to ensure that the equipment is FEOC compliant and that there's meticulous documentation that's done with your developer and these records maintained over the next 5 to 7 years, so that you don't have to worry about any sort of IRS clawback of these tax credits.
Yeah. Second big one we see, Dan, is people taking the first unsolicited bid that comes across their table. And what that often leads to is supplier margin erosion. So if you don't run a competitive process, if you don't choose the right partner, if you don't build the right system, very often these ITC tax credits become more profit for the person building the system for you versus it being passed on to you. So you want to make sure that you give yourself time to run this process and ensure that you are the beneficiary of much of these economics.
Yeah. So third, internal delays. I think teams don't appreciate that missing the deadline can erase 30 to 50% of the project value. And the IRS does not take any like, oh, well, we were almost there. We were trying to get it done. We just couldn't. We had one more signature to get. Like, that doesn't fly. And so really, internal alignment, approvals, they can take a life of their own. And I think it's important to enroll anybody that's going to be involved in the decision-making process that has to put their signature on contracts, get them involved early, because you don't want to miss out, especially after doing months of hard work to get up to the 1 yard line and then not be able to cross the finish line before the July 3rd deadline.
Yeah, exactly. And last but not least, documentation. So obviously the IRS requirements are strict and they've increased over the years. And so if your supplier doesn't know exactly what's required, you could be exposed years from now when you're filing your taxes. So make sure that you are all aligned in terms of the expectations. And then it's really critical that as you're going through this process, that you're capturing and centralizing all documentation associated with the purchasing, procurement, development of these systems. Because when it comes to filing taxes a year, 2, 3 from now, you don't want to be scrambling around trying to dig out documents and align the numbers.
Yeah. Well, and this is exactly where VECKTA comes in, not as a developer of these systems, but as an orchestrator.
Yeah. I think the key to this, with time frame being the critical factor, what would traditionally take 6 to 9 months of procurement, we're now seeing possible within 4 to 16 weeks. And that's really critical to now protecting this ITC value.
Yeah, and that means system optimization, competitive RFPs, apples to apples valuation, and contracts that actually protect timelines and incentives. We've done this with companies like Grainger, where speed, discipline, supplier competition directly translated into higher incentive capture, better terms, better long-term economics. And we were able to run that entire procurement process in exactly 2 months. It was a sprint, and it required a very strong internal champion to get it over the line, and they had a lot of muscle memory in doing projects before. But shout out to Justin and team for getting that over the line. So it can be done, but you don't want to be in the situation where you're trying to jam all this into a 2-month process.
Yeah.
So what's the takeaway, Gareth?
Yeah, big takeaway for me, Dan, is there is a nice window that is open, but it's not a super wide window. And so if you are even have an inkling that you're going to do solar in the next 5 years, you should really be accelerating that and acting now to capture these tax credits.
Yeah, and this isn't a story about solar. It's about capital discipline, and we know that utility costs are going to be continue to rise. I think any prudent CFO or finance team would really want to take advantage of these if they're on the horizon.
Yeah, exactly. Capturing the ITC is one of the highest ROI decisions you and your company can make right now. But it'll only be done if you're intentional about it. And I think, a key message we do want people to take away, Dan, is there's a real exciting opportunity here. But that being said, these projects are good even without the ITC, and we've seen that. And they're only going to get better, especially as utility rates continue to rise, the cost of deploying these systems drops, permitting, interconnection, regulations become more supportive as utilities want more capacity at the distribution level. But there is free money on the table right now, and we would encourage you all to take advantage.
Yeah, and even when the solar credits sunset, the credits will continue to exist for batteries. Yep. We'll still have 100% bonus depreciation in year one. And there's many state and local incentives that are becoming available. I mentioned the governor of Illinois signing some legislation just at the beginning of this week. So we're starting to see more and more of that. And that'll start to make up for any lost economics as the tax credits go away. If you want help navigating the process, reach out. Let's ensure you're dedicating time and resources to the right projects at the right facilities in alignment with your financial preferences and goals, and sourcing the best partners to build that project and ensure that you save money and support your long-term power goals for decades to come. I mean, really, this is about owning your power and understanding that the entire electricity landscape is changing, and the laggards will get left behind, and the leaders will continue to grow and prosper and dominate.
Yeah, profitable opportunities to be captured as we speak. We're definitely going to continue to dig in on this topic in the coming episodes because it's very important. One of the next ones will be about how you actually monetize these tax credits. But until then, consider what's possible across your organization to achieve these tax credits between now and the middle of the year. And we'll keep you informed. Check into the next episodes. And like Dan said, if you've got any questions, reach out. We're here to support you. Cheers.
Cheers, Gareth.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.